So here we are, sharing secrets of the soil with me, your host, Regen Ray. Hello, soil lovers, and welcome to another episode of Secrets of the Soil. I'm Regen Ray, your host, and I am so excited because I know that our guest today is a lot of people's fanboy, and he's also my fanboy. Welcome to the podcast, Charlie Arnott.
Oh, Ray, stop it. No, the feeling's mutual. I'm loving what you're doing out in the world, Ray, and I think, the more of us who are in the space, talking our truth and, telling everyone about our experiences and sharing what we know and what we're observing, I think it's just a really good thing. It's a really positive time for farmers and farming right now. Very, very exciting times.
Absolutely. And I was on the phone with a friend yesterday. His name's Les, and he said to say hello, even though you don't know him yet. So he was a fanboy as well. And I said to him that I'll say hello, and I did it on the airways. So, Charlie, I think you don't really need...
Hello, Les. Hello, Les.
Excellent. I'm sure that'll make him very happy. So if you email into the show, we will do your requests. Tell us a little bit about who you are. And, I know a lot of people know you already, but we've got a lot of new soil lovers after the pandemic. So who is Charlie Arnott?
Ray, welcome to all your soil lovers, and thank you for the opportunity to have a chat with you and them. Look, who am I? I am, I guess maybe I'll start with who I was. Many years ago, I grew up in a conventional farming situation, that being at Boorowa, sort of an hour and a half north of Canberra, conventional farming, lots of inputs, lots of outputs, sheep, cattle, crops, hay, lots of activities. Very busy, but not unique farm at Boorowa, mixed farming. So then I started having a few reflections and thoughtful moments and tension events in my life, which made me think about what I was doing, whether I wanted to be a farmer, whether I wanted to be sort of continuing to be the type of farmer that I was at that point in time, which was based on what I'd learned at school, at university, my life on a farm and growing up. So that was my background. And then through a number of tension events and sort of epiphanies and meeting a few, people who were certainly I had not met before and were doing things I had not even heard of before, I started my regenerative journey at that point. Not that word regenerative was really used much back then. It was 16, 17 years ago. And so, it got to a point where we do things very differently now. We use biodynamics regularly. It's one of our cornerstone practices and philosophies. We just do sheep and cattle now. We don't do all the cropping. And we also run biodynamic workshops, and we're advocates for what we do. And we're still very experimental too, I have to say. I don't have all the answers. I've never been, professed to be an expert. We're, always experimenting and trying to do better things. I was just talking to someone a minute ago about an experimental sheep and heifer drench we're going to use on Friday, a couple of days before the full moon. Now, if you'd said that to me 15, 16 years ago, that I'd be making a drench out of herbs and drenching my sheep and cattle with it on a full moon, I'd have probably shot you, So things are very different now, right?
Excellent. And it's beautiful to see unfold. And I definitely agree that the times are changing and our mindsets and paradigms are shifting. And I love the work that you're doing to educate and move forward that narrative. And I think regenerative principle is that continual learning. Like, it doesn't ever stop. It's experimenting. It's what if this, what if that? And farmers are born innovators, and so I really love that, this world of regenerative and experimenting and farmers tinkering in the shed, solving problems, welding stuff together, kind of brings that physical world to the mindset world as well. So your regenerative journey is great, and your podcast, which you also have, is called The Regenerative Journey. What got you that bug to educate people when you started learning this information? Where does that need to educate and inspire come from?
Oh, that's a great question, Ray. It's probably a couple of things. I guess I'm naturally curious. So, I guess I was in the first place, I was curious to understand what else. What else is there? Other answers, other outcomes, other ways of doing things. So that was, I guess, the starting point. But why did I share that? I guess again, my personality of, I guess, maybe being curious about what other people would think of that and if they would like to have a go at it. It certainly wasn't about being boastful because, again, my God, I've made some so amazingly wonderful mistakes along the way, which I'm happy to share and have shared. So I guess it was almost felt selfish to not share. You know, it was like, well, it's worked for me or it hasn't worked for me. Why wouldn't I just be, you know, transparent and open about that? Which is what I also found, Ray, when I stepped into that world and those people who were the pioneers and the people who've been doing this stuff for years, that was what they did. You know, there was an atmosphere, an attitude of sharing and collaboration. It's pretty hard to ignore that. So it was just like the natural thing to do. I also think, Ray, there was probably there might have been some sense of guilt as well around, you know, what the crimes I'd committed in those paddocks years ago. You know, that you know, and I know every paddock and every tree and every strainer post and every gully. And what I've done in those environments in terms of the spraying and the chemical use and the, you know, the plough, whatever else, was detrimental. And so in sharing my journey of healing of that land, it may be appeasing my guilt, you know, of doing that somehow. I don't know, there's probably some psychology around that we could dig into one day, Ray, but, you know, I think it sort of frees up, you know, frees me up a little bit from that sort of a, you know, attitude. And it's also about being, man, I'm not the expert. This is what I did. It worked, it didn't, you know, hands up. Anyone else who's got a better idea or another observation, I'm really happy to hear it too, because it's, as you just mentioned, it is a journey. It's not a destination, I believe. And, you know, the day that I stop, you know, being on that journey and contributing to my farm and that I'm not intentionally trying to heal or enable the healing is the day that I'll be put in a box.
Yeah. I love that. And Charlie, I think it's such a great distinction, and even to call it out as in, like, you know, the crimes that you had done on the farm, you know, because there is a lot of death and killing that comes to the conventional farming. And, you know, maybe it is a bit too heavy to call it that. And I know at one point I wanted to kind of say that, you know, farmers need to go through a rehab program because they're addicted to the use of chemicals, no different to, you know, someone, you know, addicted to a drug, and you got to wean off like that. That's the same psychology. I think there is a lot of psychology of what you just explained, and definitely we would probably have to get another expert in that because I definitely don't know enough in that area. But it is that heavy, you know, it is that kind of paradigm of seeing everything as a kill culture rather than as a heal and a live culture, you know. So I like the fact that you've labeled it that, and maybe that is what soil lovers need to hear to wake up and go, oh, I've never seen it like that, or I've never thought of it like that, and now it hits home.
Well, it's about having that responsibility, you know, because I you know, that word, I like sort of emphasising the fact that word is two words. It's response and ability. So it's your ability to respond. And my response in those situations many years ago was, yes, it was about death. It was about pesticide, herbicide, fungicide. It was a death sort of response to the landscape and the products I was wanting to extract and create and sell from that. So, you know, that is a different responsibility now. The way I respond is very different, and I am able to, and it's really about what am I in control of as a distinction from what am I not in control of. And if we focus on what we are in control of, then the results are very much more our responsibility and of our doing, and more likely to be on purpose with our life, you know, and why we are farming and you know, what is it we're actually trying to do, and more so be, you know, what are we trying to be in this world? You know, are we trying to be farmers who are extractive, you know, or are we going to be farmers who are collaborative and proactive and productive, you know, and effective?
Charlie, I love the fact that you broke that word up, because I feel like sometimes the answers are right in front of us. Like, in order to take responsibility and the ability to respond, it's right there in the word. I had a very similar situation with healthy soil. It was like, heal thy soil. You know, the word healthy is heal thy, you know, heal the body, heal the mind, heal the soul, heal the soil. You know, it's right there in front of our face. If we slow down to stop and look at it and look at the many parts that make the whole. And so, you know, soil lovers out there, like, take that moment to just slow down and reflect. And Charlie, I'm interested in knowing, like, that guilt, you know, it takes a type of personality to kind of possibly stand there and admit and go, maybe I've been doing it wrong, and maybe my generational farmers have not hit the nail on the head. how can you inspire someone to kind of put that ego aside and just charge forward with this new paradigm? Because I do see and hang out with people where ego plays a big part, because it's like, you can't tell me that what 5 generations have done is wrong. Maybe it is.
No, it's a good question, Ray. If nature becomes, I guess, if we look at it from a business point of view, because we're all running businesses on our farms, if we consider that nature is our most valuable, ever-present, powerful, and generous business partner, right? Imagine sitting beside your business partner and your ego is bigger than theirs, or thinking you're going to win one over. I mean, that's not a partnership in the first place. So if we consider that and we walk hand in hand with nature into decision making and literally into the paddock, right? I just don't think it's a very good idea to lie to yourself or to try and fool nature, or try and, definitely don't go in a battle with nature, which is what I used to do, So I guess getting back to your question, it's just being honest with yourself and going, look, it's about picking your battles and going, I have a choice. Every morning I have a choice. And once upon a time I chose to kill stuff every morning, I now choose life. I choose do no harm or do less harm, and I choose to partner with nature. And again, it is the most generous, it is the most forgiving, it is the most powerful. And I guess if you can't see that, and if one can't have that perspective as a farmer looking after landscape, then you will always be at war. You will always have a bigger ego. You will always think you're at the top of that pyramid. There's a beautiful diagram of, man's on top and everything else is underneath. We are in the middle of the whole thing. So really it's all about attitude and one's perspective. So I'm not sure if I really directly answered your question there, Ray, but it does take a bit of thinking. It does take some reflection. And it also, it's about accountability, being totally accountable for one's actions, No farmer, I don't think, really intentionally. I probably know a few who, don't give a shit really, but I don't think majority of farmers don't intentionally go out to destroy landscape. Their intention is generally very pure, very positive. They want to do the right thing. They want to grow nice sheep and grass and trees and so on. But it's in the execution. How much of the ego gets in the way of that execution, and how much of an emphasis are they putting on, and how much communion do they have with nature to come to help make those decisions. So it's about letting go, as you say, letting go of your ego, and also breaking a lot of those old paradigms, which my old paradigms did not include anything to do with nature, apart from it being a resource there to be used.
Beautifully said, and I think you did nail it. Putting it aside and focusing forward, and even doing those positive steps. It doesn't matter what label it is: biodynamic, regen, organic, syntropic. The label doesn't matter. It's the intention, and if you're wanting to do the right thing, and it's a process. It's a journey. Like sometimes inputs need to be around. It's not, you can't go cold turkey on this stuff. The soil would not appreciate that. And neither will your farm and your financials and your bank managers and all those people in the mix. So, it is definitely a journey. It's about taking those small positive steps in the right direction. When did you realize that biodynamics played a big part in your farm management system? And what does a day look like for you now on the farm with this biodynamic mindset?
Cool. Well, I guess the first real direct involvement with Biodynamics was when I heard Hamish Mackay, who's now, we're great mates and just got off a webinar with him. We run our biodynamic workshops together. It was probably 15 years ago at a farming conference, a resource consulting service conference, and Hamish spoke for an hour and a half, and he blew everyone's heads off. It was incredible. He went hard. We was in a conference with, pretty up there kind of top 5-10% type of farmers. And so heads were popping all the way because he was going pretty hardcore with this sort of stuff. Yeah. And my head exploded too. However, one thing I was left with was really resonated with me because it was kind of I guess I'm curious. I have a science background, but I'm a farmer and a human being. So I also have I feel like I'm reasonably in touch with nature because that's my playground in my office. And so there were parts of me that it resonated with, and it kind of went, I was thinking, you know what, that kind of makes sense. You can't, I couldn't explain it. A lot of science is not good at explaining everything, and it never will, and thank God it won't, because if we knew all the mysteries of the world and had all the answers, that'd be pretty boring. It helped piece together a lot of things I've been observing and feeling, and it kind of, it didn't give me all the answers, but I was thinking, there's something in this. There was something quite profound. And of course, that was when, I hosted a workshop with Hamish and John Priestley not long after. And it was really compelling stuff, not just the practice of it, but the cosmic side of it, the way that we are part of this massive, universe, cosmos, and to think that we're just operating down here in isolation, doing our sort of science-based stuff is, I just couldn't, that didn't gel with me anymore, even with my science background. So it's become a big part of what we do. Again, I'm no expert. It's a journey, that in itself. It is such a big topic. But again, if you have the mantra, don't say no, say oh. So when you hear something kind of crazy, don't go dispel it. Put it, just maybe put it to one side, or just say, oh, that's interesting. And these things tend to grow on you. And as you hear something at one of our workshops, for instance, or you read something in a book, and then you go and ground truth it, and you go outside and you go, actually, you know what, that did happen in that time of the year or that season or something. It's really interesting how these things start sort of coalescing. So what does a day look like? Well, in terms of the biodynamic side of it, generally we do most of our activities in autumn and spring, being a sort of a warm, mildish time of year, not too hot, not too cold, and hopefully not too dry. And we use, just in a basic sort of a routine, we use soil activator, which is a number of different soil preparations made with mainly cow manure and a few other minerals and a few different techniques to make that. Your soil lovers will have to come to one of our courses, Ray, to understand the nuts and the bolts of it all. But nonetheless, it's, so we make our own products, let's call them fertilisers, for want of a better word. And in the afternoons when the earth is breathing in, we spray these preparations out in our paddocks. And generally we spray them in paddocks where the cattle or sheep have been, so the grass is been eaten down, is a bit more open, and and the plants are responsive to it. Having said that, if we are mating sheep and cattle, with bulls and rams, we spray it in front of them a couple of days before, because we've found that is and there's some correlation. I'm not saying it's causation, but certainly some interesting correlation with fertility rates and pregnancy rates and lambs on the ground and calves on the ground if we do that. So, and we have a stirring machine called a flow form. It stirs up the liquid. We mix these fertilisers in, these preparations, and we just throw it in the back of a ute in a tank with a pump, and we burn around paddocks and we spray it. The one thing to note in terms of our day and what we're doing in those activities, Ray, is it's very intentional. My old days of conventional farming were, I would look at my list of chemicals I need to get from my agronomist, and I would buy them, and they'd come in a tub, like a drum or a bag, and I would spray them out. And it's very, very, it's like a recipe. It was very prescriptive, and I had no I wasn't in touch with the process at all. It was like, I need to spray something to kill something to get to the next step of this production cycle. With biodynamics, and pretty much, and I suggest any other regenerative type practice, it's a very intentional thing. You're thinking about why you're doing it. This is about healing. This is about health. This is about fertility and fecundity, and this is about production of healthy food and helping to heal an environment. And so we don't just burn around and think of where you're going to the pub that night. We think about what we're doing. I think about the crimes I've committed. I think about the love I'm bringing to that landscape. I'm thinking about the gratitude I have that this land has given me a sanctuary. It's an opportunity for me to express my creativity. It's given me the opportunity to grow food that I'm going to feed. I'm going to sell to people, and they are going to be healthier for it. And it's an opportunity to be compassionate. It is a real. Biodynamics. Getting back to your question earlier there, Ray. For me, it gave me some structure around how how can we build a relationship with nature? And this is called a ritual, and without any sort of crazy connotations, it's a practice, and it's about, it's an act of compassion, saying, you know what, I'm really grateful for what you've done or what you're giving me, and here's a little something back for you. I'm just going to give you a birthday, and so that's what the day looks like. We do a couple of hours of spraying in the afternoons, but there's lots of other different things in terms of animal health. And I might have mentioned earlier there before about the natural drench. We're giving some ewes and some heifers on Friday, and it's a mixture of a couple of herbs, like I think there's rosemary in there, there's wormwood, there's garlic. There's I'm not sure it's olive oil or some other oil brand, or no, rice bran. It smells just like pesto. It's amazing. And so we're going to drench our ewes and our lambs and heifers on Friday with that, again, on the full moon.
Excellent.
So that's a bit of a snapshot, Ray. There's a lot more to it, really, but and it's all about, if I can say, whether it's biodynamics or it's, permaculture, or it's any sort of practice that is you term regenerative. For me, it's all about how you adapt that to your farm. It's not about having a recipe. It's not about, he's doing it, I better do it exactly the same way, because there's so many different variables and so many different, reasons why you are doing it, and it's got to align with your values. And so, that's what we do. In terms of biodynamics, the principles, like anything, principles by definition, they don't change, but it's how we use those practices, and what are our little rituals that we have, in the day, in the week, in the month, in the year, that's more important for individuals to actually create themselves.
Charlie, your farm life sounds magical, to say the least, and it smells like pesto. Like, why wouldn't I want to be there?
I swear I kid you not, it was amazing. Tessa, she works with us there, and she's amazing with the horses, and she's been treating the horses with different things for some time. Apple cider vinegar's in there too, I think. I think we're going to be doing a little video on it at some stage. She's fantastic, and so she did a little sort of a sample batch up the other day, and if she hadn't told me, I'd have been putting it on my toast, and it was a bit of tomato for sure, and something. It was just delicious. Well, it smelled delicious.
Lovely. That sounds amazing. Soil lovers, there you go. And it doesn't have to be just on a paddock and a farm. Like, these are we've spoken to a lot of people with biodynamics that are doing it in their own backyard, and the neighbors go, wow, your backyard looks so green and it's glowing. And maybe it is. So on that note, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the paddock between your ears and how buyers are more connected to the source. All right, welcome back. You're hanging out with Charlie Arnott and Regenerate. Charlie, I know that you're a big believer, or you've got a quote that you have kind of coined and made big, but this paddock between your ears, what is it? Tell us, soil lovers, what this paddock is. What is
the paddock between the ears? Nice one, Ray. Well, look, I guess it was something that I think Charlie Massey got me thinking about it some time ago, and I think you might have called it the field, but that square foot of real estate between your ears. Yeah. Anyway, it sort of morphed into paddock, as in my mind, we're so used to, as farmers, doing stuff in the paddock, and it's like, we go to a course and we go, I'm going to do that, and we're literally in the paddock the next day and we're doing it, which is great. We're experimenting and so on. But the thing that really struck me in part, early on in my journey was that, a tool in the hand of an inexperienced or ignorant person can be really dangerous. And it's not about just grabbing hold of a recipe or a tool, that you've heard about or read about, and going and doing it. I mean, that's not saying that's a bad thing, but in terms of, why are you using it? What is what's the intention behind the use of that? And so for me, it was like, well, maybe we don't just go into the paddock straight away. Maybe there's another paddock we need to change, and we need to bust some paradigms so that we can be more accepting of even thinking about that tool in the first place, and then having a better foundation, a better mindset, a better motivation for using that tool in the paddock. So, so it's that paddock between the ears where, there's probably, if you were to break it down, a couple of sort of stages of what happens in that paddock there, of breaking paradigms, because there's only so many paradigms, there's only room for so many paradigms in that paddock. breaking a few, being curious enough to want to learn something differently, identifying that there's maybe a better way to do it. And that's tough, and it probably relates back to one of your previous questions, Ray, admitting to yourself that you've probably stuffed a few things up and that you're probably not doing as good a job as you can. And when you do that, the other thing that sort of often pops up in a farming family context is, when you get to a point of saying, maybe I need to do things differently, or I'm doing something not very good, or let's even say bad right now, if you're the son or daughter of a farmer, then that in some way can be confronting, because on some level you might think that you by saying that you're making your father or your mother or your family wrong, and that's a big thing. So it's about how do you reconcile that in your own mind and in your relationships with your family. So that's what I suggest people think about is, yes, gather information, be curious, talk to people. There's a gap there, I reckon, between finding that and then implementing it, the execution. You have the intention, but there's a place for some reflection, because it's a good investment of time and energy, I think, to just stay in that paddock between your ears for a little bit longer than you're probably used to, just to get clear. And does this new practice align with my values? Does it lead me to where I want to go in terms of the vision for my business? There's a whole lot of questions you can ask yourself about. Does it, is it something I want to be doing or I feel I should be doing? Is it something I can bring my family along for the ride on? Is it actually going to be creating a better outcome for my family? These are all things that people should be asking themselves. Is it going to make me more profitable? Is it going to create different relationships? Before they go and woof into it, straight into the paddock. But again, having said all that, Ray, sometimes the best lessons we have and we need actually are because we skipped that part and we've gone straight out and done something. And that's fine too, but they're the hard lessons to learn. We don't have to keep making the mistakes others have made. We can learn, it's a bit of a Tony Robbinsism, learn from other people's mistakes and save yourself the grief and the time and the money. But don't think you're never going to make a mistake.
Yeah. The permission to make mistakes is definitely there, and that's where innovation happens, and that's where we all learn. And, I think sometimes some of the techniques that we do now came from mistakes or came from, a mixed up formula, and then it's like, oh, hang on, now it does this, so definitely embrace that curiosity and to think outside the square. And, I think for the soil lovers out there, you're doing the best thing you can right now. You're listening to a podcast that's, right in your earbuds. That's the paddock between your ears. And Charlie Arnott, you have your podcast, The Regenerative Journey. So hanging around great minds, if you can't be in the room physically, then hanging out virtually and, while you're doing other tasks in a podcast. Now, your podcast is called Regenerative Journey, and I'm really curious to know from your point of view, what does the word regenerative mean to you?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it, Ray? That mine is pretty vague and broad. Not vague because I don't want to sort of have an opinion on it. It's more that it's, the definition, my definition is broad because I think it's reflective of the actual the world of regenerative agriculture, regenerative anything. I think so. Mine, in very simple terms, and is any practice or philosophy or principle that is building the soil quality and quantity, on here, there, anywhere, and also just sort of to add to that is, and I cite Charlie Massey's 5 landscape functions here as well. Any philosophy, practice, a practice that is helping to build upon and restore the function of solar cycle, mineral cycle, water cycle, the biological cycle, and I'm simplifying Charlie's sort of breakdown of the functions, and then the people cycle, the community cycle. If there's anything that's in what you're doing that is improving the individual function, but you can't escape the collaborative function or the synergistic function of those. That's regenerative. Now, I know a lot of farmers who are doing things very regeneratively would never even think that they're being a regenerative farmer or don't like the word, and that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
I think, it's not in the spirit of the kind of farming, this working with nature, when we try and pigeonhole things too much. It's very reductive, and it's getting back to it's dragging some of our old paradigms and baggage of conventional farming into the now, when we need to define things. And some people need a definition of that's absolutely fine, And, then we sort of step into the world of certification. Certification, I'm not certified. I'm not a particularly big fan of it. I'm not saying don't do it to farmers, or I'm not saying to consumers don't go and source certified food. I'm just saying that, that pigeonholes things in, and I know a lot of certified producers. Well, I won't say a lot. I know a number of certified producers, and I've tasted plenty of certified food that if you were to go on farm, you would go, don't know quite where, it's pretty clear that certification system is based on ticking the boxes about practice. I'm not using chemical, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. It doesn't necessarily evaluate what they are doing, the positive inputs, what they're putting back in. You can't just take chemicals out and think that nature's just going to suddenly miraculously produce the best food in the world. It does take time, it takes an input, it takes a lot of intention. A certification, whether it's organic or biodynamic or regenerative, I think there's a number of different type of regenerative certifications down. To me, it's all about what happens at the other end. What's the quality like? What's the nutrition load? What's the chemical thing? So, look, I keep it pretty vague, Ray. And anything, but it's not like it's a cop out. It's more, it's what you're comfortable with. And if you're only lying to yourself, or having a lend if you just try and sort of manipulate that definition to suit what you're doing, because if you're cutting corners, you're going to get found out. If you've got to sleep at night, and if you're if you're not internally comfortable with what you're doing, it's going to pop out somewhere. So I just think, whatever blows your hair back, and in yourself, as your soil lovers, whether you're the eaters of food, which we all are, or you're the producers of food, that you'll know if you're doing it regeneratively, and others are doing it too. Your taste buds are probably the thing that's going to tell you. Sorry, that's a Marima we've just acquired as a rescue dog. Red, shush.
Sounds of nature. I want to focus on the fact that you use the word improve, and I agree. The reason why I asked that question is because we don't want to define it. I'm trying to highlight the fact that it is very unique and it's meaningful differently to each individual guest and person that I speak to. And I think putting it in a box and creating a checklist of things that it needs to be is the problem. And so getting people's take on what that word means to them is part of the intention of that. What I'm trying to highlight is that listeners out there, our soil lovers, can hear that it does mean something different, and it's up to them to go and find out what regenerative means to them. And so that word improving, I think, is a really good kind of distinction to say it's improving it. We all know that we need to go to the gym, but we don't do it. It's that action. We all know that we need to eat healthier, but we don't do that in our buying decisions. And I want to visit this whole connectivity to the source. And I know that you play a big part also of being an advocate to buying better quality food. Can you speak to that a little bit? Like what needs to happen in order for us to be more connected to better quality food and not just food?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, that's another big conversation there, Ray, in itself. I think in terms of, people, eaters, everyone who's looking to buy good food, asking better questions of yourself. What do I really need to be eating to be healthier? Let's not kid ourselves. And also, probably more importantly, to what our children need to be eating to be healthier. What are our health parameters? What are our indicators of health? One of those is what is my connection with nature, and the natural sort of progression for that is, well, how often I've been to a farm, because farms are natural. Well, the ones you'd want to go and eat their food from is they're natural. So getting on farm and actually talking to those farmers, understanding it, kids love that stuff. And they lap it up, and they actually need it, and they need to be in touch with animals. They need to be breathing the biome of where their food's from, as Zach Bush would say. So, having that direct contact, not just putting it in you, but being in the environment that it's made. So it's within you, and it's without you. You're there with your family, and again, children. It's a really sad thing when children. It's a massive part of their life they just don't get to, or part of their humanity, or their being human. Yep. They don't get to express themselves. And I see it time and time again, whether it's children eating good food or it's children in the environment, that is their natural state, and you can pinpoint a lot of child illness and mental dysfunction, if I can put it that way, in children, and you can trace it back to their lack of good food and their connection with the world. In terms of labelling, Ray, I'm a big fan of the idea that labelling needs to spin 180. We need to be going into shops and seeing labels that say food, right? It's actually not even labelled. They're just like, this is broccoli, this is carrots. And the other bunch of food is labelled chemical food, right? Why do we have to identify the organic food? And food that is identified, I'm not saying it shouldn't be, but why do the growers of organic food need to be paying, a certification system, and putting more time and effort into that, when they're growing food? That's actually the food that we should be looking at. And the people who are growing shit food, the chemical, laden or produced food, they should be made accountable for what they're doing, and it should be identified as that. And we've got to spin that 180 degrees so that people go, oh, maybe it's not like, oh, organic food is too expensive, I'll eat this other stuff. It should be, why am I eating this other stuff if it's got chemical in it? And, oh, actually, that's the stuff like Michael Pollan talks about. He talks about, don't eat anything your great-grandmother doesn't recognise. Pretty good advice, I reckon, And they didn't have labelling back then. They just knew, and they used the taste buds. Kids learning to use their taste bud from a young age, it is the best tool they've got, and their eyes and their ears and their senses,
Yes, 100%. And I was at a conference that you shared that idea of labeling things that aren't food. And, and I think that, that's the harsh realities that people need to see. We need to walk down the aisles and call out the poisons and the chemicals that are in the food. And not wait until it's too late. So many people are waiting to prove that something's dangerous. It's like, if there's an inkling that this is no good, that should be the warning signs. That's the red flag. That's, and the question of like, why is organic and regeneratively grown food so expensive? The question should be, why is the other stuff so cheap? Both arguments are so important, So I know you and I are both on the same page with that.
And just on that, Joel Salatin has a great line. You want? I think it was Joel. He certainly talks about it enough. Do you want to pay your farmer now or your doctor later?
Yeah.
If you don't pay your farmer for good ingredients now, and the value and identifying, acknowledging the value of food, and then if you're not willing to do that, then you will have to you will suffer the consequences down the track when you are spending, dare I say, a whole lot more money on doctors at the end because you just neglected to think about. I love the expression, be kind to your future self. And we don't do that. There's a whole, yes, there's the philosophy of be here and be now and loving thyself in this present moment. But I think if we think about, that person who will be us or is us in 20, 30 years' time, whether it be retirement or you've just had your first kid or whatever, and you think about, will I be proud of the way I treated myself now when I look back? I don't know. There's probably there's not a whole lot of people would be going, yep, I am totally on point there, and I will be thanking myself, in 30 years' time. I think that as a reference point. And also your kids too, the kids are, you're asking kids, how did I go as a parent, Now, hopefully they will know more about food and sort of the origins of and how to produce it down the track. But, getting some critical feedback from your children and being just honest with yourself and going, if I was my kid, what would I say in 10 years' time, 20 years' time?
I love that. That's a great reflection. So lovers, think about how you can bring that into your daily daily thought today. And I think that's a really good question. And I'm assuming when you say your kids, you mean like young kids or adult kids? Like when they're... I've
got sort of both. I've got stepchildren who are 25, 21, and I've got, me personally, an 11-year-old and nearly a 4-year-old. So, yeah, look, it's any person younger than you, I think... but again, getting back to oneself, it's like, think think about who you want to be and what health you want to be. And look, we all have parents or have had parents, and we often, we travel on that journey with them as they become more elderly. And that, to me, is also a good reference point for, what have they been eating? What has their exercise regime been, and how have they treated themselves? And because you share the same genes, so that's kind of, you can tick that box to say, okay, I'm sort of genetically, where our genotype is pretty similar, but the phenotype is the thing that is the thing that we have much more choice of. Once we leave that nest. And I have another great, not certainly a quote of mine, I can't remember where I picked it up from, but something I always bang on about is, our job as parents is to prepare our children to leave us.
Yes.
And if they leave at 18 and they're not prepared emotionally and physically and mentally and nutritionally, and they haven't the habits of life that will leave them in good stead or keep them in good stead, that's our responsibility to that point. And if they're leaving school and they don't have no idea about how to feed themselves or budget or behave in what are the social norms and have those productive and positive rituals, then we can't even blame ourselves. So, and food habits and buying habits and connection with nature is all part of that too.
Absolutely. Charlie, are you ready to become the voice of our soils?
Yes. You prime me for this one, right? I'm a bit nervous.
No worries. If you were the voice of our soils, and I want you to embody the soil, what would you tell us on planet Earth?
I would just say tread lightly. I think, tread lightly on me, and tread lightly on the earth. And that's not being passive. That's just being respectful. That is a way of showing reverence. It's like, wow, we're pretty lucky to be on this earth. We have it in our power to keep screwing it up, and as individuals, especially, being privileged to be stewarding landscape at this moment, being able to listen to that soil, and to tread lightly and to do no harm, and have reverence for it, it changes everything. So I think if I was the soil and I could, if I was able to, if I had, that's what I would say. Because I don't want to be too descriptive either, because people have different ways of expressing themselves, so it's just a prompt from the soil for those with a conscience to do what they feel is right. And if people do have a conscience and they do have reverence for the land and the landscape and the earth, they will do the right thing,
Absolutely.
So I think is that okay? Is that
Nailed it. Charlie Arnott, it's been an absolute pleasure hanging out with you today and digging deeper into the wonderful world of soils. And so if the soil lovers are out there and they want to tread lighter and be kinder to themselves, how can they hang out with you more?
Ray, thank you. Look, I've got a website, charliearnott.com.au. We have a number of different things that people can sort of dig into there. I've got my podcast up there with many fantastic guests who, and it's not just about farming, it's about meditation, it's about health, it's about all sorts of different vocations, because we all have our own regenerative journey. And it's interesting, the more people I talk to, the more it's emphasised how food and farming and nature all are central to those regenerative journeys in different ways. So put your ears on and jump on podcast platforms for that. On the website, there's different, if you're a farmer or an eater or a feeder, you can have little trips down and find a few different little things out there. I'm on Instagram, Charlie Arnott 1. I'm on Facebook. There's lots of ways to get in touch with me, and we are running 2-day biodynamic workshops in Southern Australia over the next couple of months, in Victoria, at Burrawa, where it all started there, Burrawa. That's in early. Go to our website, all the dates are there. We'll be in Tassie, hopefully at the end of October, and WA in November as well, if all goes well and the borders aren't shut completely.
Awesome. Well, there you go, soil lovers. That's how you can hang out more with Charlie Arnott. The links will be all around the show notes. And if you're watching on the Soil Learning Center, the video experience, you will see the links as well. So go and check that out. The workshops, I've done the intro to Biodynamics, and it was mind-blowing. And that was just the scratch of the surface. And so I'm super keen to hang out more in the biodynamic world. We've got a lot of members in our community who are biodynamic farmers or just landholders or garden people, and they can't speak highly of it. And so there you go. That's how you can definitely get outside and get your hands dirty and be kind to yourself by hanging out with great minds. And with COVID, I have to say your Instagram does keep me very entertained. So, head over there and follow. Charlie does amazing content. And just, last week there was a question about why is the grass greener under this dead tree, and then seeing all the comments was just so fascinating to see how people are viewing the landscape these days. And it was really, really magical. So that's a little bit of a taste of what you can get if you hang out more with Charlie. It has been so great talking to you today. This has been a podcast that I've waited a very long time to do. So thank you for coming on and sharing the secrets of the soil.
Ray, look, it's been a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me to share some stories and yarns and things. And good on you for doing what you're doing, helping people, share their voices and their stories, and making it easy for people to understand and get their head around, the topic of regenerative farming and good food and health. So good on you for keeping, for maintaining the rage. And especially at a time when I think that, it's really important with, COVID, and what's not being talked about with COVID is the health side of it. We can all, there are things that, we're being suggested need to be done in our lives, but there's also not the conversations that should be taking place about, well, how do we build our immunity in the first place? So it's all part of the mix. So thank you for being an advocate for all that, Ray.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. Well, thank you. There you go, soil lovers. So now you've got a lot more things to think about with your paddock between your ears. So get on outside, get your hands dirty, keep digging deeper and tread lightly. I'm Regenerative. Well, soil lovers, that's enough secrets for one episode. I really hope that you enjoyed all the secrets shared during this conversation. But hey, let's not keep it a secret. Please share this podcast around and make sure that you like it and leave us a review, because that really helps spread the secrets of the soil. Until next time, remember, get outside, get your hands dirty, and keep digging deeper into your soils.